we start the meeting, let's go around the room to introduce ourselves. I'm Councillor Mary Jones and I'm the convener of this panel. And if we go that way first.
Liz Jordan, Scrutiny Officer.
Morning, Councillor Cyril Anderson, Cabinet Member for Waste Management and Parks and Cleansing.
Good morning, Jeremy Davis, Group Leader for Parks and Cleansing.
Good morning, Bob Fenwick, Group Leader for Highway Maintenance.
And good morning, and my name is Councillor Michael Locke, representing Scrutiny Ward.
And if we go round, well, sorry, I should have welcomed, we have new members on this panel as well. So the first one is you, Mike, so you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, Councillor Mike Day from Scrutiny.
And underneath it's you, Chris.
I am Chris Waters from Swansea Council, from the Grounds Maintenance Surveyor in Parks and Cleansing.
Thank you. We go to Councillor Chris.
Good morning, Councillor Chris Evans, Miles Ward.
Go up to the Cabinet Member who is having difficulty joining us. He's there at the moment, but he may have to leave. So over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Andrew Stevens. I'm Cabinet Member for Environment and Infrastructure, largely highways and transport, but biodiversity and rural development, and among another number of things. So.
Are you able to hear us, Bridget? I know you've had problems.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear you then. You're Bridget Rowlands, and I'm ward member for Clydach. Sorry, I've got issues with the camera on my phone this morning, so I am here.
Okay, thank you. Then up to the top to another new member, Adam.
Hello, Councillor Adam Davis, Luca Ward.
And the bottom right of my screen is on his first name. Oliver. Oliver, sorry. I've got to call you by your second name. Oliver, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there, Councillor Oliver James for Cockett Ward. I'm keeping my camera off as I have a terrible cold and nobody wants to see me today.
Okay, thank you all very much. Right, so the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Joe Hale and Councillor Jeff Pritchard.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. Councillors first. Anybody? No, officers? Okay, thank you. Next item is prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. And then the next item is the minutes of the previous meeting, which are on page 1, page 2, page 3. Those of you were there, do you agree they're a true record? Yes, thank you very much. The next item is the letters that we wrote and received. Okay. And then the next item was public questions. Have we had any public questions?
No, we haven't received any public questions, Chair.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the update on the weed spraying and wildflowers. So I'm assuming we're going to you first, Councillor Stevens, because I know you want to say your piece before you might have to leave us.
Yeah, thank you. You put the pressure on now, Chair. I'm going to say a huge amount, if I'm honest. No, I'm sure all the members here have read the report. I'll touch on it briefly. It obviously covers highways and parks in terms of our use for herbicide glyphosate. And thankfully, my colleague Councillor Anderson is there in the room with you, Chair, as well as we've got Jeremy and Bob. So just to touch on it briefly, the report provides an update on our approach to weed spraying and wildflower planting across Swansea, outlines the current practices, the balance between public safety, cost and environmental responsibility, and how these fits into our wider commitments on biodiversity. I won't go into it too much further, Chair. As always, I'm interested in hearing the views of all the members on the committee anyway, and I'm happy to. But I do want to put on record my thanks to both Highways and Parks and all the officers involved in terms for the work they do, work they've done pulling the report together, and the work they do on a daily basis. To be honest, yeah. So.
You, Councillor Stevens, have you got anything you'd like to add, Councillor Anderson?
No, I think my cabinet member colleague have reiterated what I wanted to say, and I would like also to put on record to thank the committee for the invite, and also Jeremy and Bob and Paul Miller for putting this report together for you today. And if there's no other questions, Chair, if we want to go into question time, quite happy.
Okay, thank you. Officers, did you want to add anything to the report? Jeremy?
No, thank you.
Bob?
No, all good.
Chris, online? Do you want to add anything to what's been said?
No, thank you.
Okay,
No,
thank you. Okay, well, we go to the first question, but as Councillor Hale has sent his apologies, instead of me trying to divvy them out now, I'll ask the question, which is obviously the age-old one. Why are we using glyphosate instead of a non-chemical alternative, and is this due to cost? Don't know who's going to answer it.
I'll take that
Bob.
one. We tend to use more glyphosate than Jeremy because of the scale of the highway. So I thought I'd answer this. It is the most effective, cost-effective, most efficient method for broad spectrum weed control. The issue we have is the scale, 6,000 streets, 1,500 kilometres of footway with curbs, back of curb. It makes it very, very difficult for alternate methods to work. Spraying is in large done by spray bar. So a quad bike will drive down the pavement and detect chlorophyll or detect greenery and spray where it finds it. Some hand spraying, not as much, but the bulk of the other methods don't work on this scale. We're looking at alternatives always, but the costs are considerable. Cardiff Council did a trial recently with hot foam, and they found that to be about 5 times more expensive and less effective than the dry spray. There's no alternatives at the moment, effectively. That's the answer.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add anything before?
Could I add to that, Chair, please?
Yes, Councillor Stevens.
Yeah, just I mean, but Bob highlighted that perfectly. To be honest, Chair, it's an extremely, you know, it's the most effective way that we can deal with those on-street weeds in particular. And don't get me wrong, our CWAT, our highways weed hotspot team, we have some excellent areas, team of staff in the local authority that do cover the odd hotspot areas that perhaps are missed or maybe due to weather or due to the process that we're doing, as well as you know, there are even teams of volunteers in terms of that are doing some great work as well. But if we got to look at this logistically across the city and county in terms of our use, you know, we do it to all the standards and specifications that we are required to, and it's done in order, you know, at the scale it's done in order to protect the highways asset and ensure that you know, ensure that we don't have too many weeds here and everywhere around the area. So yeah, I just want to back up Bob's response to that question, Chair. That's all.
Thank you very much. Councillor Anderson, do you want to add anything, or any other officer? Okay, thank you. So we're going to the second question then, which is from Councillor Day, which is on the same subject.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope as a new member, I'm not overstepping the mark in terms of the way in which I approach the question, but it's obviously a concern by residents in connection with the impact of glyphosate on human health and animal health. And you know, my question is, you know, how do we get that balance right? What sort of information do we use to ensure that we're not in a position of putting human health and animal health at risk. I've been sent recently some information from one of our residents about the global glyphosate study, which was June the 10th this year. And it's headed up that international study reveals glyphosate weed killers cause multiple types of cancer. Reading it, I'm no scientific expert or expert like we have amongst our officer corps, but clearly they've done a number of studies, and I wondered at what point do we look at this sort of background? Do we rely upon other sources of advice and information to enable us to make decisions about the future use? Because as Andrew and the officers have said, that it is a balance, isn't it, in terms of not just in terms of the look, in terms of dealing with the weeds, but also safety aspects in terms of people trips and falls, and potentially those with wheelchairs and so on having difficulties, as much as the sort of long-term impact potentially on the infrastructure. So it's a question of getting the balance right. But I just wondered whether how much attention we pay to these studies and what we actually come to in terms of a conclusion, and how we come to those conclusions. So I know it's a bit of a long-winded thing, but what is the evidence? What is the impact of glyphosate on human health and animal health as well?
Right, who's going to be in the hot seat?
I'll take that one if that's
Thank you.
okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair.
This comes to the crux of the conversation that we tend to have the most about the use of this particular herbicide. And I'm aware of the study from June this year. I'm also aware of numerous other counter studies that would not agree with the findings of that. So as officers, we ensure that the council's use of pesticides, including glyphosate, is governed by UK and Welsh government policy, guidance and regulation. So in this case, since we left the EU, the Health and Safety Executive is the regulatory body in relation to the use of pesticides, and glyphosate remains approved for use until 15th of December 2026. And the HSE has indicated they are likely to give a further 15 years of approval. More details about this can be found on their website. So we do appreciate the concerns raised over the impacts from various studies on human and animal health, and it's important that we base our operational decisions on the guidance of regulated authority bodies. So we must assume that the HSE will consider all the emerging scientific, technical and regulatory advice in its ongoing assessments. So to maintain that clarity and consistency in our approach, we therefore rely on the position of the HSE, and we try not to incorporate external studies into our operational decision making unless they're formally recognised within a regulatory framework. We do know that glyphosate's mode of action targets an enzyme which is not found in human and animals and is not persistent in the body. So acute toxicity is low, and chronic risk at environmental exposures is considered but negligible, particularly because we spot spray. We don't spray without control, and we ensure all of our operatives are appropriately trained, contain the correct licenses, and use the chemical in accordance with the directives.
Thank you. Any officer, cabinet member want to add anything?
I'll add to that, Chair, if you don't mind, but very briefly, Jeremy hit the nail on the head there. Look, as someone who has done their PA 1, 2 and 6 in terms of certification, there is such thing as safe use of using things like herbicides like glyphosate and what have you. I mean, these things aren't just used, certainly not by us in terms just for the sake of it or willy-nilly or what have you, and splattered everywhere in terms of what some feedback and unfair feedback that I've had around the use of the spaying program. So they just wanted to maintain that Jeremy hit the nail on the head in terms of with all the legislation and where we are now in terms of that. But from the safety aspect, there is still safe use of using these things anyway, Chair. So.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate what Andrew says. I'm sure our officers are so clued up on this. And I'm also sure if there was any other herbicide that could be used, we would be using it. But under the HSE, I think we are well maintaining our guidelines. And I know for sure that our officers and our operatives don't go out overspraying. They just keep it to a minimum and at a safe level, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, the next question, obviously you've touched on this in your answer to the previous question, but actually this is actually probably a better question for Councillor Sarah Keaton, because she was the one that raised it originally, but unfortunately wasn't able to come to the pre-meeting. So I'll ask the question, but I might not get it all right. So if you want to correct me, Councillor Keaton, please do. It's, what is the environmental impact of glyphosate use on biodiversity, particularly soil health and pollinators? And the origin of the question is when we have the wildflower programme. And every year they're grubbed up, for want of a better word, raked over, put glyphosate on it, and then have the seeds planted for the following year. Now, in my own ward, which is Dundon Calais, we don't mind not having that done and just see if we can have more native flowers. But the point we're trying to make is apparently it is affecting some of the bees and insects and things. So I hope I got that right, Councillor Keaton, but you're quite, you can contradict me if you wish, but I'm not sure who's going to answer the question. Or do you want to say anything first, Councillor Keaton?
No, I think, Chair, you've covered that well. There is a concern that, I mean, I've got nothing against the hardy annuals rather than wildflowers. I think they're lovely and they look fabulous. I just wish we could just plant them without spraying first. That would be the dream. I think they last longer. I think they flower for longer. I mean, down here particularly, they'll flower until December nearly. You'll see cosmos still flowering. But we do want to reduce the glyphosate spraying, and that was the main concern. So I think you covered it well. Thank you.
Right, Jeremy, is it?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. Thank you, Chair. Again, we recognise the balance that we need to strike here. Ultimately, the sowing of non-native wildflower beds where we have to use glyphosate as the starting point to sow those is optional. Ward members can tell us that they don't wish for that to take place, and we won't do so. What we do know through studies that we've done and discussing matters also, not just with ward members, but with residents, there's a very strong view either way. And almost a 50-50 of either we want them or we don't want them. We don't mind if it's used or we do. It is recognised that studies are looking at endocrine disruption in relation to the use of glyphosate for bees. However, I think it's really important to point out that the Park Service is a very small user of this herbicide. The Highway Service is the greatest user of it. So they don't indiscriminately spray on areas of green space. They target hard surfaces and use equipment that spot sprays as a result. Our use of it is predominantly for the control of Japanese knotweed. And there is no other chemical at the moment that has been proven as effective in actually killing Japanese knotweed. We have a statutory responsibility to control that invasive species. So we would agree that the non-native, whilst it doesn't look as good as, the native, while it doesn't look as good as the non-native, would be preferable around doing planting schemes. But then members need to accept they will come under pressure from their residents who then want to see the decorative, really colourful displays that we get from the non-native ones. And as I said in the report, if I can draw your attention to paragraph 3.3, it gives an explanation about why it is that we use glyphosate for that reason. Manual rotivation over and waiting regrowth and then repeating the process multiple times to suppress competing weeds and grasses is so laborious, we simply do not have the resources to do that. And we balance our use of glyphosate around enhancing biodiversity, including the wildflower planting and management. So that's not just these display schemes that you see. We have a large-scale ongoing programme of meadow and wildflower management going on at the moment in our cut and collect programme. And we don't provide detailed scientific evidence in relation to soil or health and pollinators, as simply we're not subject matter experts on this. And ultimately, we rely on the forensic analysis of the studies of the HSE before they publish their guidance on the product and how we should use it. However, as responsible users, we do know that it is non-selective and it can kill wildflowers as well as weeds, potentially reducing food for pollinators if it's overused. So to mitigate this, we ensure that all the operatives are trained and licensed and use the products as recommended. And in parks in particular, we avoid spraying in sensitive areas and we time the applications to minimise the impact. And as I said, the highways programme uses targeted spot spraying, so it's not indiscriminate. So it would not affect other areas. And we further mitigate the risk by avoiding spraying during flowering and near watercourses. The highways weed spraying focuses on harder surfaces, so the greater user of the product is really not applicable in this context of the question. Happy to take any further questions on that.
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to try and do is finish the section. So once Councillor Locke has asked the question, again, he wasn't there, but we've slotted a question in for him afterwards. I'll ask if anybody else has further questions on this part of the agenda. So now the next one is over to Councillor Evans, who was actually in the pre-meeting. Can I come back to Councillor Evans? Or, sorry, Councillor Keaton's first, sorry. Councillor Keaton.
Yes, it was something you said about the spraying of actual concrete areas and tarmac. When glyphosate was first designed, it was designed and they thought it was good because it actually broke down in the enzymes in the soil. Andrew, you probably all know this, so I'm just saying for other people who wouldn't. And they thought that was great because it disappeared per se after a short period of time. Unfortunately, it wasn't designed for spraying on hard surfaces where it tends to stay active for longer and build up. So that is a concern as well. And I just thought I'd point that out. And I love the idea that we can actually get the hardy annuals put down without spraying first, because I'd be first in line for that. Thank you.
Do you want to come back, Bob, or do you want me to bring in Councillor Evans first? Right, Councillor Evans.
Yeah, I was just wondering how effective glyphosate actually is. I know it markets itself as something that's the only thing that can kill knotweed, but just sort of looking at some of our parks, Singleton Park in particular, there's a lot of knotweed there, and it doesn't seem as if the glyphosate is actually touching it.
Right, well, I think you've both got a question to answer. Jeremy first, then about Singleton Park.
Yeah, in relation to the efficacy of Japanese knotweed, I'd ask if Chris Waters would be willing just to come off mute and answer that one as our park surveyor and also responsible for the knotweed spraying team. He has a particular expertise in this area. So, Chris, are you able to answer around the efficacy, please?
Well, to be honest, like I say, we need to know exactly with the Singleton Park, because if it's actually been identified to us that it's on, because I know we do treat some parts of Singleton. But as for the efficacy of the treatment, we've had great success over the years. And in recently, we've had at least 6 claims put in against the council, and it was due to go to court next week, where they've pulled out due to the fact that with the treatment we've been providing over the years, and almost, we don't call it eradicate, but controlling the knotweed, which is reduced, which is some areas then there's only one stem has come up when this area was approximately 100 square meters. And it saved, on that case, that saved the council hundreds of thousands on court cases, because, as I said, at least 5 have pulled out now because of all the evidence we can provide. But I disagree with it was not effective, because over the years, when we've been treating it now, I'm trying to work out, it's something like 10 years we started the team, and we've had huge improvements on housing, education, parks, estates, highways. You know, and it is doing the job. And I've been on many seminars with the Amenity Forum discussing how effective knotweed is with Dr. Jones, who was one of the world's leaders on knotweed, was in Swansea University. And as we've tried any other chemical, because we have tried other chemicals, and we don't have the same success as we're doing with knotweed.
Can I just add to Chris? He's spot on in what he's saying in terms of at least from my previous experience, even before doing this, in terms of what I know, it is not the only, but is the best thing in order to, well, I say the best herbicide in order to control knotweed, because another really good way to control knotweed is cattle, but I'm not sure how that's going to work out on our highways verges. But so it's the second best to cattle, and put it that way.
Is it just cattle or goats? Because they could tether the goats.
Maybe goats. I have had no experience with goats, so.
North America, they use goats. They use herds of goats in North America, but obviously you can't really, because they eat everything else as well. So
A novel approach. Sorry, Bob, did you want to come back about Councillor Keaton's point about it building up on the hard services, the website?
I'll be frank there, that's not something I was aware of, something that we can look into, but obviously we follow HSE guidance. And with the hard surfaces, we only spray where something is actually present. In the general cases, can't say we do it every time, and there will be some hand spraying. But if it's a concrete slab or something, it won't get sprayed on. It'll only be the joints or the cracks, the sections between or the edges. But it's certainly something we'll have a look at, but it's not something I was aware of.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we go now to your question, Councillor Chris Evans.
Cool. Just before I ask, I was just going to ask if there's a backup plan for if knotweed becomes glyphosate resistance.
Sorry, can we leave the knotweed, because we've got questions
Okay.
on knotweed further on. So if we stick to the glyphosate and the weed spraying, and then we'll do the knotweed when we get to that
Okay.
section. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Has the council considered a phased reduction or trial of non-chemical alternatives, and what would be needed to resource this?
We're going to take this question between us because obviously, as we've stated, we've got two large service areas using the chemical in slightly different ways. From a parts perspective, we remain open-minded and we have explored non-chemical alternatives for managing the invasive species such as Japanese knotweed, including methods like steam treatments and even electrocuting, believe it or not, the plants. However, there are practical limitations that have made the implementation extremely challenging, specifically the size and the design of steam equipment, which is considered the greater alternative. It prevents access to many of the locations where knotweed is present, particularly in confined or difficult to reach areas. While a phase reduction or a trial of non-chemical methods remains a consideration, resourcing such an approach would require significant investment in more adaptable equipment, which at the moment we have not seen as available. We'd also require additional staff training, additional staff, and potentially increased operational time to achieve comparable results. And if I draw your attention back to what Chris Waters was saying around the fact that they've had extreme success in the use of glyphosate managing the invasive species, we would be extremely concerned to immediately go for some form of replacement without ensuring that it has the same efficacy. So therefore, in achieving the comparable results, we would need to look at a detailed feasibility study to assess the viability of alternative treatments across the range of sites we manage. However, other councils have already done this. So, it's a case of reinventing the wheel effectively. The other councils that have trialled alternatives such as hot foam, acetic acid, and even going to complete manual removal, these have all been found to be not only less effective, but extremely labour intensive and significantly more costly as a result. Cardiff's trial, for example, as Bob has alluded to, the hot foam required 6 or more treatments per season and was 5 times more expensive than glyphosate. And in our current financial climate, I imagine that would be extremely unpalatable for us to try and consider resourcing. However, we remain open-minded. I'll hand over to Bob now in relation to a highways context on this one.
I would say likewise, we remain open-minded. We do keep a watch out on the ABSI websites, performance networks. It must be 2 or 3 times a year a question will be asked about one council to another saying, does anybody have any option for highway spraying? And to date, there's been no alternatives come up through any of the councils involved that when we network and collaborate. Brighton's an exception, but that's covered in a question later on. I would say just to put it in mind, our hotspot team, and we're very, very proud of Keith and his team. They do excellent work in small areas where there's real problems. The funding for Keith and his 4-man team is the same as funding for spraying the network 3 times, if that puts it in perspective. there's just the cost differences. The whole network 3 times or Keith for very, very limited areas. I'd much rather have a lot of manual staff doing the manual weeding and have all those resources, but it's just not feasible at the moment with finances.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next question is from Sarah, which has partly been answered. So I don't know if you want to sort of rejig it.
Okay. Yes, the question I have here is how does the council monitor and mitigate the carbon footprint of weed spraying operations? I know I've read the Cardiff, the council I meant, I've read the Cardiff report, and yes, it comes out quite clearly that it's too expensive to do anything else. But when comparing chemicals and manual or steam methods, so yes, I do know the answer to this, and I think most of the people around the table do know the answer, that we would need to completely change things around. So the only thing we could do is concentrate on a way of manually pulling up weeds rather than spraying. Or the steam is completely out of the question, I know that. So yes, I think the question's already been answered. So there we go. Move on to Michael's, I think, again.
Which again has been partly answered, but there we are, you can ask it.
Yes. I just asked this question, but I think it's already been answered, at least, or almost entirely. What lessons have been learned from other councils, for example, Brighton, Hove, Cardiff, regarding glyphosate-free approaches?
Bob, is it?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I mean, we do watch others. There's the APSI comment I've just made. Newport Council some 10 years ago decided to stop highway spraying for around 18 months to 2 years. And you can actually see the weeds from the motorway as you drove under their bridges. Didn't last long. They had to abandon it. Brighton was the one we were all watching because it's very, very supportive or very anti-weed spraying. And they were the only authority that we are aware of that went completely glyphosate free. There's a lot of people say they are, but that generally is in relation to spraying in localized areas, maybe in parks or open spaces. On the highway, Brighton are the only ones, as far as I'm aware, that took the step. And the report in 23, no, that's Cardiff's one, sorry, recent report back from Brighton, they've reversed the decision because they found there was too much damage, too much problem. Weeds were growing out of control. They had to recommend and revert to going to a spraying program. Yeah, we'd love a solution, but at the moment there's nothing. Anyone else gets success with this and we'll copy them happily.
Thank you very much. Has anybody else got any questions about the glyphosate, the weed spraying? Not weed, we're coming on to that next. Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, and apologies, I've only just joined the meeting about 5 minutes ago, so if this question has been asked, please feel free to stop me in my tracks. Obviously, we've established that the budget constraints and manpower constraints as well, or people power, sorry, constraints would are the reason that we can't manually do all the weeding throughout the whole network. However, is there some parts of the network that we could maybe not spray, for example, around schools and around parks or certain areas of parks? I mean, obviously the data is still being processed, but God forbid that it's ever proven to be linked to anything. At least those school areas would be protected, and we could say that we have, done everything in our power around schools and things. So apologies if that has been asked or if you have covered that, but that's just my question. Thanks.
Jeremy, is it?
Yeah, I'll come in on it from a parts perspective. Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I mentioned earlier on that we'd already significantly reduced the use of the herbicide in our operations. It's not used indiscriminately. And I think you need to consider the balance here around, whilst there are conflicting reports about what the chemical is capable of doing in relation to human and animal health, we don't walk around with a lance spraying it in the air. I think there needs to be some context here around the use of the chemical. And when you consider our use versus agricultural use, for example, it's significantly lower. by factors of the 100. We spot spray, we target areas based on where those plants are that are invasive and require dealing with. And as I said, there is no alternative to us using the chemical to be able to control invasive species in this way. And not to do so, as Chris Waters alluded to earlier, leaves the council open to substantial prosecution charges in relation to our failure of a statutory duty to control an invasive species. So it is a balance. We're very careful in the way that we use it, and we are mindful of the sensitivities around it. But as I said earlier, we follow the HSC's guidance in relation to the use of this controlled product, and we make sure all of our staff are appropriately trained in its use, and we use it as sparingly as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So
Sorry, could I follow up, Mary? Just to say, sorry, it didn't really answer the question. I was just talking about just specifically, for example, schools. Have we ever looked at not spraying just around schools and inside school grounds? Thank you.
Jeremy?
I'm going to ask Chris Waters to come in again in a second on this, around the actual operational side of it. But ultimately, I go back, I think I did answer it, because there is no other way to control an invasive species, regardless of the land that it sits on. So for us to be able to control it effectively, and it ensures eradication and not grow back, generally over a 2-year period of treatment, then there isn't an alternative. So no, we haven't considered it in that way. And ultimately, we operate on the contract of the education service, and if they require us to treat it in their land, then this is the way that we do so. Chris, have you got any follow-up on this?
No, can you hear me now? Because my computer did play up a minute ago.
Yes, we can hear you.
Right. The thing with the schools in particular, obviously everything we are governed by the HSC with what chemical we can use, and obviously it's, as they said, it's safe to use around animals and people. However, if the schools wanted to pull out and not, we don't make the decision to spray the schools. Obviously, we get it from education. They ask us to treat it, but there is, as for the treatment side of it, they wouldn't be treated when the kids are there. Normally, when they treat the schools anyway, the team go in there on the school holidays to spray it. So, and by that time, then obviously when glyphosate hits the ground, it goes onto the plant. Within an hour, it's into the plant. The remaining glyphosate then becomes inert because because it can't, the soil particles don't seem to hold it on and so on. Yes, with the tarmac and stuff, but they're only spot treating anyway, you know. So it's normally a very small amount which will be going on each individual plant. But as for not treating the schools, I don't know what other issues. You could end up with bigger issues then by having vegetation growing around the schools, you know, end up having drainage problems and so on. You know, it could be a number of things which could sort of happen.
If I could just make a closing remark on that, Mary, I promise I won't mention anything again. If that is the case, and we you know, make a conscious effort to spray in and around the schools also, not just inside the schools, but the highways around the schools, out of term, I think that's great. That's really good, and that shows some really forward thinking. But I think if we could double check that in the letter, we go back. I can't answer.
Sorry, I can't answer the one about the highways, obviously, because the contractors do that. But as for inside the schools with the parks, and as the staff of the parks normally treat within the school holidays when there's no children present.
That's great, thank you. And maybe we could look at the highways around the schools as well. In the letter.
Bob,
Thank you.
Bob is here. Yeah, obviously, you're not sure who's in the room, Councillor Thomas, but Bob Fennick is here from Highways, and he will have an answer for you, Bob.
I think when we looked at giving the option of exclusions, we had to take it on a ward by ward basis. Some councillors approached us and asked to do smaller areas, but the logistical difficulties with spraying the whole network, which is a huge area, are quite considerable, and that would put up the supervision, management, and everything else, those costs up a fair bit. So that's why we went for the whole ward opts out, with the exception of maybe major roads or the prom, for instance, in West Cross Males. In terms of trying to say not around schools, that would be extremely difficult again. What are there, 200 schools, something like that? I don't know. it's a figure it's 104, 150 schools. Then if you're just looking at the boundaries of all those schools, that makes, again, the logistics of doing it very, very difficult. In effect, when we're spraying, because of the methods used, and it is generally quad bike with spray bar, which is very low to the ground, they're gone and passed within a few minutes. You know, it's not a significant time spent on each of these areas. They are straight through. Whether I could separate out schools or not, I thought I'd find that be quite difficult to do. It's not something I'd want to take on operationally or logistically, and managing it is difficult. I mean, at the moment, where there is a private street, or sorry, an unadopted public highway, those are sprayed by the contractor because it's easier for him to spray the unadopted private highway, public highway, than it is to try and organise which streets are done, which streets are not done, which footpaths are done, which high level streets are done, or high level verandas. It becomes a lot more complicated. What they do is they hit an area, they've got a map, and they tick it off as they go. To organise that into exclusion zones of where you can and cannot do would be really difficult for us, I think. I could certainly look at trying to get them sprayed in out of term time, but because we could do 3 sprays again through in the year, and actually getting them done on the timetable is difficult anyway. One of the things that stopped them this year, there was a couple of days where we had slightly high wind, so they wouldn't spray. Doing them out of term time is something we could look at, whether we could do a proactive spray around the schools separately, but then again, the difficult there is excluding them afterwards. Could certainly do a spray out of term, but remembering not to spray later on when you've got contractors doing, say, 1,500 kilometres of highway, and taking 3 or 4, 140 areas off. And how far do you go? Do you just do the boundary footpath around the school? Do you do the side of the road opposite? Do you do the whole street? Do you do the feeding streets? Do you do the access roads? That becomes a very, very difficult logistical operation, I think. So, interesting idea. I'd be reluctant to take it any further because of the difficulties involved. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go on to the next section now, which is the dreaded knotweed, and it's over to you, Councillor Keaton.
Sorry. Apologies,
Oh,
Chair.
sorry, Councillor Stevens.
Sorry, I just wanted to come in briefly on what Bob said. And I think because Will did technically miss the question around when we were talking about the safe use of glyphosate, really, weren't we? Just a few questions ago, in terms of the fact that when Bob said that it's done to all the required standards, you know, with the drop bar or what have you is being used, and ensuring that all staff using it are fully trained and certificated in order to do what they do. So just wanted for Councillor Thomas, in terms of Mumbles, or for Team Mumbles, then to discuss, maybe, because the option is there for you to Team Mumbles -1, perhaps. The option is there for you to opt out should you wish to do so, but logistically, as Bob highlighted, it's difficult because there's so many factors in terms of what we have to take into account with the overall programme, and we are looking at some areas of the overall programme that we can improve in terms of windows that we're doing it, and we've been having discussions on this for some time, but obviously got to compete with weather and this, that, and everything. But the option is there for you to opt out as a ward. You know, should you wish to do so, and maybe not all the ward, but certainly a significant part of it if you wanted to do so.
Yeah, we have with our AOMB area, but thanks, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Keaton, are you asking a question or are you asking your question?
Well, I was going to ask a bit clarification, really, because you switched from saying invasive species, and I didn't know whether you just meant knotweed or whether there were other, like Himalayan balsam or something like that, or was it just general weeds? My concern with that is that there is a problem. There is a problem with, sorry, daughter in background. There is a problem with already with the plant immunity to glyphosate. There's been cases already in England where they've sprayed it and it's not working. So surely if you want to keep it for knotweed, we should try and not spray it around randomly, because I think the soil gets used to it. So yes, I just needed to know what you meant when you say invasive species. Do you mean any weeds, or do you just mean knotweed and Himalayan balsam?
Invasive species are actually categorised, and there's a responsibility to control them, but I will bring Chris in on this one because he'll have better knowledge than myself.
Chris?
Yeah, technically with when we term the invasive, it's mainly knotweed. You know, you can spray Himalayan balsam at the beginning of the year, but once it comes into flower, it's a waste of time to spray in it, because by the time that each flower head will produce over 500 to 1,000 seeds, and they disperse. So with Himalayan balsam, if it's only a small area, you can literally hand pull them and just leave them dry out, you know, but then spray. But normally the invasive that we do mean knotweed is obviously the number one. But obviously, yes, there have come occasions where we have gone and treated Himalayan balsam. Not normally anything. We don't treat anything else. You know, like down the Gower, they've got cotoneaster growing on the cliffs, which is another invasive species, which is not for parks to do any. But I'm just giving you an outlay on that. But no, normally knotweed is the invasive. That's the main. That's the problem anyway that causes for the council.
Right.
Your question now then, please.
Right. I noticed Chris has got his hand up. No? Okay, I'll ask my question.
Can I just add to that as well, Chair? Sorry to come in. Like on the immunity thing, like my understanding is perhaps it is a potential emerging problem in very industrialized agriculture, and particularly in some places like the US, South America, those type of large scale, particularly ones that work with a lot of things like GM crops and stuff. But when we're talking on the small scale, the very small scale in terms of councils are using it, I don't see how that kind would present an issue at any time, really, myself. But
there's been a few documented cases in England. That's why I was asking. So I'll get on with the question. What areas of Swansea are we currently treating for knotweed?
Is that you, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'll take this one. Thank you, Chair. The knotweed is present to varying degrees across all areas of Swansea. So as a result, our treatment programme covers all council-owned land where infestations have been identified. We also carry out treatment on private land where we're contracted to do so, and this ensures a consistent and effective approach to managing knotweed throughout the city. So to give you specific areas would be substantial, and ultimately it's a rolling programme based on areas that are identified, and once the team have dealt with that, they'll move on to the next one.
Thank you.
And so, Councillor Locke.
Yes, I'd just like to ask a question on knotweed. Are we winning, or is the position stabilised, or are we losing? Thank you.
Chris, can you answer that one?
Yeah. Well, I would positively say we're winning, definitely winning. But the problem is, it's obviously it's getting the resources, which we have at the moment. But obviously we will start to struggle if more and more come on us. But at the moment we're definitely winning, and that's shown with the court cases, because obviously if we hadn't been treating it, hadn't been recording it, the council would be out of pocket for, I couldn't tell you how much money, but you're talking in the hundreds of thousands. So I would say yes, we're winning, definitely.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's nice to know. Right, mine is, we've just mentioned about private knotweed. What is the income from private knotweed treatment used for?
Yeah, thank you. Prefer the simple ones. Yeah, so the income generated through the Japanese knotweed treatment is utilised to directly support and sustain the delivery of the service. So the funding enables the continued provision of the specialist equipment that's required, monitoring and associated operational activities, ensuring the service remains effective and responsive to the demand. I think it's worth pointing out, Chris alluded to the fact, I think it's just over 10 years ago when the team was originally set up. Funding was temporary at the time, and it was originally there to resource the staff only. There's been no revenue increase in that budget since it was originally set up. So effectively, the service is identified to overspend at the start of the financial year, and the income they generate ensures that they at least fully cost recover. And if they achieve any more than that, it's reinvested back into the provision of equipment, safety gear, and training.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, the next question is me again, but I've got an A and a B to this one. We're back on flowers, actually. I don't know why we've done that. How is the council engaging with local communities and schools to promote native wildflower planting and nature recovery? And part B is, are there any grants available to these groups for this?
I'll take that to give Jeremy a break.
Thanks, Paul.
But it's a response we've had from Paul, from the Natural Environment team. They've been actively working with local communities and schools for decades, recently supported by Welsh Government's local Places for Nature grant. Anyone interested in developing a project is encouraged to contact the Nature Recovery team directly. Their education officer, Karen Jones, is engaged with schools across the county to promote nature recovery, wildflower planting. Schools not currently participating are welcome to get in contact with Karen to explore opportunities for involvement. Standard Council email, karen.jones@swansea.gov.uk. Some of the activities include wildflower, tree and bulb planting, as well as providing planters, bird and bat boxes. Around 40 different schools in the county planted native bulbs. 17 of these schools have also planted wildflowers and trees using this grant. In addition to council-led initiatives, Keep Wells Tidy offers us a garden pack, which are available to schools and community groups. Further funding opportunities are available through National Lottery Community Fund. Many schools also participate in the Eco School programme, which supports environmental education and action. The recovery team, Communities and Nature Project Officer, is working with a wide range of local community groups to support nature recovery and green infrastructure initiatives across Swansea. They also work closely with the Environment Centre's Community Green Space team to provide support for such initiatives funded through the Welsh Government. I would add that Highways have been in contact with the Environment Centre recently, and they're looking at doing some work with us, or we're trying to support them in some of their projects.
Thank you. I just wondered how communication is dealt with. I know people have to email Karen, but I think you said she contacts schools, but I don't know if the understanding is there. You said some schools. How can we make it more, so people actually can engage community groups? I'm thinking of, obviously in Calais there's a community council. I think they're aware of Wales Tidy, but they might not be aware of other things. So I don't think we're very good at, asking people through any kind of communication what is on offer. Should we do like a little press release in the press? Not that people read the Evening Post, they read it online. So maybe, it can be something there. We just don't seem to be able to get our message out then that there are these things available. And I don't know how we can overcome that. But, it's interesting that we are trying to involve schools and communities. I'm not sure we've got the message out wide enough yet. Anybody else want to?
Yeah, can I come in? I'm not sure I'm not sure. Oh well, I'm not sure I do fully agree with you on that, Chair. In terms of the nature recovery do a lot in terms of engagement. I mean, there was only I think it was via the STC in terms of we doing the Wild About Your Ward maps that are going to be disseminated to all local members, and we try and do what we can from comms. I mean, I've been over to Garth Farm myself to see the peat bogs there, and we're trying to put comms out on the on how that peat bog actually originated and things. So I find it really fascinating myself, to be quite honest, even with the orchids that you had growing in Dunvant Meadow there. I mean, I know Councillor Gibbard sent me a number of photos that we passed on to our comms team to try and put out those messages. I know the nature recovery teams via the Section 506 biodiversity officer. They've engaged with community councils. I mean, I've seen a number of back and forths that I've been included with. I mean, even with the local, with the changes we're looking to do in terms of the changes from sinks to local nature reserves and the engagement that's going on with the commoners. I mean, we've got the sec of one of the commoners on the call here now, actually. So there is a lot happening in terms of the engagement, and I'm not familiar of exactly what. Which schools have been involved, but I'm pretty sure there are a number of them. But the one thing that I think I mentioned in the Service Transformation Committee before, or it could have been in this meeting once, Chair, actually, was as ward members, we've got our part to play in terms of this and communicating to this to our communities, and showing what we're all doing in terms of or what we're all doing to on nature recovery, or what we're doing to try and improve things like native wildflowers, or cut and collect schemes, the area is happening in some, explaining to residents why some areas might not be getting cut quite as often, or some areas are getting cut and all the grass and is getting taken away in terms of the reasons for that. I mean, only in Golden Grove Park, we've been out there with the local friends group there. We've had interpretation boards put up to show which areas are being left for nature or sympathetic to nature, or try and teach people in terms of exactly why we're doing this going forward, Chair. So I think there is a lot going on, and I do think we are getting that message out now. But yeah, I'm happy with any suggestions from any members on this call on how we could improve that, of course. So,
like, it wasn't a criticism. It just seems that some areas have better communication, should we say, than others. And I agree, we as ward members do have a role to play. It's just when there's something exciting like the peat bog, I think, it would be, a way. Is it just on the council website, whether people would just read it as news? I don't know. I think we need to, send our message out, in a more positive way. That's all. It wasn't really a criticism of anybody not doing anything.
okay.
Right. The next question then is Chris Evans. Are you still there, Chris? All right. Okay. So we'll go to Councillor Locke then.
Right. It's like a nice, easy question. How can we prevent grass cuttings from going down gutters and drains?
Jeremy.
Yeah, don't cut the grass probably isn't the answer that you're looking for. I must admit, when I saw this question, I did try to understand what the relevance was to the actual report that we're presenting today, which is around the use of the herbicide and wildflowers. However, I'm more than happy to answer it. The Park Service takes great care over its operations and to try and prevent grass from going off site when it does its cuttings, particularly on highways, verges, etc. But ultimately, it's very difficult to say that would never go down the drains, and I'll bring Bob in a minute around whether it actually is an issue or not. Secondly, as well, you may have seen the substantial cut and collect program that we're undertaking at the moment, albeit some of those aren't as adjacent to drainage, but also can affect culverts, etc. as well, where we're lifting the cuttings and when we're carrying out these grass cutting operations. So that will help mitigate this as well. But as I say, I'll bring Bob in now for a view on actually whether it does cause an infrastructure issue in relation to drainage.
I think there's a good point just to emphasise again is when Jeremy said when they're cutting highway verges, the Parks team obviously do all our verge maintenance and management. So when we're talking about highway spraying, we're only talking about curb to footpath to back of wall. So it's a very, very limited area, and the right people to look after the green stuff is our Parks, because I'm not good enough, to be fair. With the grass, rarely, I think in about the 15 years I've been doing the job now, I think 2 or 3 times we've had problems or complaints or blockages through to grass cuttings blocking a drain. It's pretty rare. Obviously the cut and collect makes a difference. That helps as well. It pales in significance compared to the problems with leaf fall. you know, leaf fall is a huge issue for us. Grass cuttings is not something I'd even consider worrying about, to be honest. And I know there's a difficulty with, if you look at the logistics of sweeping operations and the logistics of cutting operations on different schedules, and trying to get them to tie up would be near on impossible, just from my small time involved. But it's not a huge issue for us, or not one I'm certainly ever been made aware of.
Very much. Right, we'll go back to Councillor Evans because he had to leave the meeting for a minute. So it's question 10, Councillor Evans.
Yes. Do we have a strategy to transition from non-native decorative flowers to native species to better support local ecosystems?
I'll take this one. Thank you, Councillor Evans, for the question. I'm really pleased with this one because it gives us a real opportunity to showcase collaboration between our services and the Natural Environment team, because ultimately the Park Service is an operational team and carries out delivery of operational requirements to deliver the council's needs in relation to strategy and policy. So we work very closely with that team, and they engage with us to advise of where they may be looking for changes in policy and strategy. Ultimately, again, they're the subject matter experts in that, and then they engage with us around operational and logistical challenges that may come as a result of it. So what I did is I actually asked Paul Mellor to give us a response to this one, which I'll just read out to you now as well, but I fully endorse what he's saying. Which is, at present there is no formal strategy in place to transition from non-native decorative flower displays which rely on herbicide use to native perennial wildflower meadows. However, Swansea Council's Section 6 Biodiversity Duty Plan and the Welsh Government recommend reducing the herbicide use where feasible. Alternatives exist, and Swansea Council has done this through significant reduction of use in the Park Service for aesthetic reasons. Councillors have the discretion to opt out of herbicide use within their wards and may choose not to include decorative flower displays. And the council has also been trialling the Cut and Collect Wildflower Meadow Management Programme, which is on the council website, and we have used extensive social media to promote that, which could expand subject to available resources. It's still in its trial phase at the moment. There is a need to raise greater awareness of how these displays are created and to assess whether communities continue to support them in their current form, as there is a very clear polarisation of the views around them.
Thank you. That gave us a very good answer, actually. Now, Councillor Hale isn't here either. He's one of our new members. Now, I hope I got this right again. The question is, how can we...
Apologies, Chair. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I've got to leave. Someone's coming to call me about 3 times. That's all. So I just want to thank you for chairing and thank the committee for and the officers there for the input in this. But I had to go 10 minutes ago. So
thank you very much for fitting us in, Councillor Stevens. And yes, you have to go to your other meeting, but thank you. Your input's been very valuable. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Right. Councillor Keaton.
Sorry, I will try and be quiet after this. Yeah, I think there's a lot of polarization about these hardy annuals, wildflowers. I don't think there needs to be. As long as you've got pollinating flowers, and a lot of them are, the poppies, the marigolds, the bees love them. The hungry season for the flowers that come, for the bees that come around June, well, they're in full flower then, so that's brilliant for them, and they carry on later into the year. I don't think that's a problem. I think the only problem is the glyphosate spraying beforehand. If you get over that and find a way around that, it would be fine. As for the wildflowers, if you do the cut and collect, they'll come on their own. We have had pictures being sent to us of wildflowers that are coming up all over the place because we're not spraying glyphosate. Well, we're not planting them. They're coming of their own accord. So I think there is this or that, and there isn't really a problem. We could have both, and it would be brilliant for the pollinators and all the bugs. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm going back to, I'm now Councillor Hale again. Now, I think I understand the meaning behind this. How can we encourage people to use their own space or gardens in a more environmentally friendly way? He did say about something in England, if I recall, and about people actually using their gardens to grow, as opposed to, dare I say, pave them over or use synthetic grass or that type of thing. I think that you were there, Liz. Is that what he was getting at?
Yeah, that was, sorry.
Sorry.
That was part of the question, and I think the other part was about drives, yes, and about what we use there.
On driveways, you know, the new people do. They have some kind of coating over it. Does the water soak away? Can they use planters on their drive? That kind of thing. It's about people being encouraged to grow things in their gardens.
Again, falling outside of parks and highways operations in relation to wildflower and weed spraying, this was a question that we asked the natural environment team to give a response to, because I think it's kind of bordering more into there, although I recognise we're on a climate change nature recovery scrutiny panel. So the response that we had from the environment manager was that encouraging environmentally friendly gardening starts with education and raising awareness. Swansea Council's website features a Ways to Help Nature section, which offers simple and practical ideas for residents to support biodiversity at home. And the Swansea Local Nature Recovery Action Plan also provides guidance and tips for individuals looking to contribute to nature recovery effects and efforts. We recommend following the Wild About Swansea Facebook page and subscribing to the Council's Nature and Volunteering newsletter for updates and inspiration. There are links to all of these websites and bodies within the actual body of his answer, so maybe provide it to you afterwards in writing so you can have those links. Residents can also seek advice from the various organisations that form part of the Swansea Local Nature Partnership, many of which offer resources and support for nature-friendly gardening.
Yeah, just as a quick addition, because you mentioned about driveways and sealing them or changing those. Obviously not our area particularly, but I do deal with crossovers, which are legalised crossovers to allow a driveway. Any driveway where there's a change of constitution of it would come under the Sustainable Drainage Act if it's over 100 square metres. That's, in terms of legislation, that's the limit. So if it's a car park being changed or something fairly large, there has to be considered, then you have to consider biodiversity, sustainable drainage, etc. But in terms of driveways, I believe if it's under 100 square metres, it would be a planning decision possibly, but certainly nothing I'm aware of in terms of limiting it.
Okay, thank you. And I've just learned something as well. So if we can have those links, it would be, you know, very good, because I'm sure Liz can ask for them in the letter and then we can perhaps put them on. Yeah, okay, thank you. And the last one, you've answered part of this as well, because it's in the report, obviously, the questions here. You might not be able to answer it, but I'm sure you've been given the answer. Is the nature recovery team fully staffed? If not, is it adequately staffed to cover when people are off, either on leave or on sick? And I think we had the answer to this one. Does the team include the Section 6 biodiversity duty officer, which I knew we hadn't had, but it sounds as if we do have now. So perhaps I'm not sure who's going to answer that. It's Bob, is it?
Yeah, my turn. There's another one from Paul. Yes, all positions are filled. There are 8 full-time / part-time staff members in the team. They cover each other. And yes, there is a Section 6 biodiversity officer by the name of Mark Barber. He's the nominated officer, although all officers in the team seek to fulfil this duty as part of their roles.
Thank you, that was an easy answer. Has anybody else got any other questions from things that are on the agenda? Is it Chris? Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Hi, just one last one on invasive species. Do we have a rhododendron eradication program?
Chris, would you like to answer that?
Sorry, I didn't know if it was for me.
You've been passed. You've been passed the buck by Jeremy.
So, it's all right.
Jeremy,
I don't mind.
can you answer about a rhododendron eradication program?
They over the years they have been doing it, obviously, because we had Phytophthora, but I do believe let me get it right. We do have I'm trying to think who he works for now. Environment Agency comes out and checks some of the road, and if there is an issue, then obviously notifies us, and we go and cut the back. As for Klein Country Park, for example, that would come under the nature, which wouldn't be us, the nature reservation team. But as for what's in Singleton, Klein, you know, and some of the big areas, if we've got phytophthora, he comes and lets us know, we point it out, and then we go there and deal with that then.
Okay, thanks. That's Councillor Day first and then Councillor Evans.
No, thanks. I hope you don't mind me going back to the weed spraying. Just a question. I know that one of the residents or a couple of the residents have raised concerns about the contractors and the work that they do, and it's just following up whether or how we monitor the work of contractors in terms of what they do, when they do, and how they do it.
Supervision for the contractors is minimal. They're all qualified. They are from one of the most reputable companies in the UK. Certainly the best company we've worked with. The biggest issue seems to be lack of treatment rather than over treatment or issues. The agreement with them, and they are very good at this, is if there's an area that's been missed, they will just go back and do it. There's no argument, there's no messing about. They will just respray for us. In terms of supervision of what they actually do, reactive, if there's issues raised, then we have had issues raised where someone's doing something inappropriate or someone's sprayed something inappropriately. It's reviewed by the manager dealing with the contract. We deal with their contracts management staff, and we look at each individual problem as it comes up. There's no strict supervision as such. It's just again, the resources would be too much.
Thank you, Bob.
Councillor Evans?
Yeah, it was just to clarify on my previous question. The reason I was asking it is because I always remember there was a bit of a problem with rhododendrons that had started growing up on the top of Getlion Mountain over Clydach. So it was more of a roadside kind of gower issue rather than in parks in Swansea.
Anybody? Anybody
gonna
got
say-
Getlion Mountain?
Before I hospital pass this to Chris again, I'll just give him a heads up so he's got 5 seconds to think about it before he answers.
Do you go for a walk up
But-
Getlion Mountain?
Sorry, I can't help you on that one with Getlion, because I don't really know the area you're on about, but no, I don't know who would do that, to be honest.
Okay.
I think, yeah,
Is
to
it-
step in again, I think taking the levity out of it, I agree with what Chris was saying earlier. I think Natural Resources Wales would more likely be involved in dealing with that. And if it's a private landowner, they would approach private landowner. If it's common land, they have their own processes for that. And as Chris said, we work very closely with them as well when they contact us about anything that's on council-owned land.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, anybody else got any questions before we move on to the last item on the agenda? No? Okay, well, thank you all to the officers and the cabinet members for attending, and well, I don't know about anybody else, but I've learned quite a bit actually. So thank you both very much. Oh, thank you both, all of you, for coming
thank you.
along. And I'm sure we'll see you again in different guises.
Yeah, can I just thank everybody for the opportunity? I appreciate that this is a sensitive subject. It is very polarised, and we're acutely aware of that. We've been more than willing to hear any suggestions you may have. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you all. And you are free to leave.
Yes, thank you very much.
Right, the next item on the agenda is the work plan, and the next meeting is in November, and we have the water quality management and pollution control and the retrofit project briefing, which is only obviously about the carbon neutral. It's not about the whole of the building services. Okay, so thank you all very much for attending, and I'll see you for this meeting in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Aye.